Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Let's take a look back at this last weekend. I'm recording this pretty late in the evening on Sunday, and I'm looking here at a map of 72-hour total accumulated precipitation. We had a front that just stalled out right here. It was the one that ruined part of the Masters. It was the one that just delivered incredibly heavy rainfall. In fact, there are parts of central North Carolina that over this weekend saw up to 6 inches of rain. You can see throughout South Carolina, down into Georgia, even parts of Virginia got in on this precipitation. Now, I know what it did to the weekend, but I'm be honest with you, I'm happy to see it. And it's always because I take the long view of the hydrological health of a region. And why I was concerned about this is that if you go back and look at the time period of March 1st all the way up to April 9th, we did have parts of North Carolina, especially coastal North Carolina, getting down into this section of South Carolina, a couple pockets in parts of Georgia, and then take a look at Virginia that were very dry. In fact, this whole region showed up last week on the newest drought monitor, having an expanded area through here where things were abnormally dry. Now, I am mostly concerned right now about three areas. This is one. Florida's number two, and then the hard ribbon or wheat belt getting down into Texas, and even as far north as Nebraska. This is the area that I'm worried about in terms of drought, which means we're going to keep an eye on these three areas in this near-term and long-term forecast that I'm going to provide. In fact, we have a new summer outlook in this particular update, and I'm even going to give you some ideas I might have about the hurricane season coming up. Problem is that after that stalled out boundary moved, big warm-up happening in the middle part of the country, but we're still dealing with colder conditions into Monday morning here. And that's why we see that when we look out at the next 7 days is where there might be a frost. There's a massive warm-up happening here. But the concern is that in parts of Virginia, stretching through the western half of North Carolina, and then you can also see parts of northeastern North Carolina showing up with a risk. And that risk is primarily going to be confined to the day on Monday, mostly Monday morning, where, as I looked at this on Sunday night, we have the freeze warnings surrounded by frost advisories all around this area. Now, something else for y'all to keep an eye on. This area will start to take on this color very soon. That's a hydrologic outlook. Notice in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of mild air coming through. There's a lot of risk of flooding coming forward, and this is an avalanche warning. So what we're going to be watching here is the transition in temperatures throughout this next 7 days and what it's going to really be doing to push some areas towards spring, and that's going to really start to increase the flood fight in some key areas that grow the same crops that we grow in the Carolinas. So we need to just watch this carefully. Okay, one other thing I want to point out, for those of you that are growing cotton down here in parts of Georgia, for example, there were big storms in Texas. And if you take a look, you can see them right here. Now, a lot of these were hailers. But this is some moisture getting into the panhandle of Texas, and this is one of our driest areas in the country. I mean, you saw it here on the drought monitor. So I just want to show you where things are kind of taking shape around the country so we can kind of keep an eye on all of this. All right, our next graphic, let's go here first. What about Monday morning? So we're trying to identify early Monday morning where we're going to see that frost. And the latest data I've got on Sunday night, Raleigh 36, we could have some patchy frost in this area, get closer to the mountains, definitely getting below freezing, and up into Virginia. That's where we have our freeze warnings out in place. So this is going to be a cold morning. But let me show you that map I just hinted out there. Things are shifting around quite a bit this week. New map we'll be looking at a lot here. I should have released this earlier for you. I'm sorry. But this is just looking at the next 7 days of total accumulated GDDs, growing degree day units. And this is using the corn formula, so a base of 50, a max of 86. But notice we're going to be picking up 80 to 90 GDDs this next week. But I want you to see what's happening in the Midwest. Look at the contrast between Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, and then the Red River of the North. Some places in here could have corn planted on Easter Sunday that could be up by next Sunday if this heat does come in like forecast. And therefore, we're going to see a lot of movement in this area, because it has been so incredibly cold. Since the beginning of March all the way to the 9th of April here, notice how cold it's been in the north and in the western United States. In fact, every one of these locations, it's got the 131 under, or you see this deepest shade here, that is where we're having the coldest such time period, again, March 1st through April 9th on record. We've been mild at times in the southeast, but we have a cold start to this upcoming week. Let's go take a look at what the temperature is going to do as we press forward. So this is now, let's get it there. There's Monday's highs. We're still in the cooler side of this front. But notice how much heat is pouring in here as we go back into the 70s on Tuesday. By Wednesday, mid-70s to some places upper 70s. By Thursday, while all the heat is really pushing here into the midsection of the country, We're going back up toward 80 by Thursday. Mild air sticks around on Friday and on Saturday. We're going to have to take a look in a minute here what the precip is going to do. Now, I want to show you this kind of important part of this forecast for the country by stepping you up to the upper levels of the atmosphere. And what's going to help us out here is that we do have this ridge that kind of builds across the country, bringing in some heat. But we end up getting this into a very important configuration in the atmosphere once we go through the day on Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday. And it's this configuration right here. There's our trough, runs over this ridge. But it appears that the ridge breaks. There's like a wave break in it. You end up getting what's called a high over low. So the issue is here is that by midweek, we're going to have to watch a low pressure cell to form somewhere down here in the south, which is going to move on off toward the south and east. And with it, it's going to be bringing the chances for some precipitation. So here it is by Thursday, getting into Friday. You see that low right there? That's the one we got to watch out for. Now, thankfully, it's not connected to deep reservoir of cold air. It's just an upper level disturbance. That's what we often call them. It's a trough. It's a short wave. It's cyclonic spin in the atmosphere. That's what it is, and you get rising motion out of it. But notice as I get into Friday, going through the weekend, what do we see? Well, there's a little system sneaking through the mid part of the country. That one's going to probably bring a front through us early next week. That's our next chance at precip. But you notice the pattern just moves. This is by the 20th, going out there to the 22nd, 23rd. We just keep seeing the pattern open and moving. That is key. I don't want it getting blocked up in spring, because if it gets blocked up in spring, somebody gets nothing and somebody else gets everything. I'm talking about precipitation. So we see it moving. Okay, what does this do to the temperature side of things? Well, the next 5 days, you've already seen how much heat builds in here. That's the ridge over the trough, the high over the low, and that's why we're a bit cooler down here for much of the next 5 days. Still mild. We're not going to be as cold as we are on Monday morning, but rain-filled air here. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So what do we see as this 5-day sliding window moves forward? Well, the pattern fluctuates a lot. And you're like, wait a minute, I see all this cold air coming in at the end of April. Do I need to be aware of No, we're not looking at a frost event here. No indications that it's only a couple of degrees colder than normal. But the pattern's just going to flow and fluctuate and move. This does one rough thing for meteorologists. When the pattern's open and moving this quickly, it reduces our confidence in the timing of events. It reduces our confidence in the magnitude of events. We know things are moving, but to pinpoint it down, it starts to shrink up our window of when we think we know things are going to start to change. One of the things I am on the lookout for is right here. I just went all the way out to April 19th, and you're looking at snow depth. You know where this started was there. On Sunday, Easter Sunday, look at the depth of the snow here. And then as I play forward, all that mild air is going to attempt to eat that snow away. And by the time we get out here toward, the third week of April, we could really shrink this down. Now, why this matters is this is one area that's been a major concern about prevented plant acres. And we want to know, are we in trouble with respect to having huge acreage here that's either going to have too much snow on it too late in the season, or all the flooding coming from the snow is going to cause major problems, preventing us from getting any field work done. And we grow a lot of the same crops there that we do in parts of North South Carolina, Virginia, and even parts of Georgia. So we need to watch this very, very carefully. All right, let's go have a look at broader picture things across the country. Now watch. As I play this forward, we get through the beginning of the week relatively dry. Then what we see here is that starting on Wednesday into Thursday, did you see that right there? Watch right here. See the moisture coming into Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia? That is when, can you almost see it? The flow's going up over the ridge, and the cutoff low is sitting right down here. So as it sits down here and spins, it just pulls that moisture up. So this is Friday going into the weekend. So you see that? That's when that moisture spreads through South Carolina into North Carolina. That's the first round of it. And as we go forward, there's a big system that rolls through the country out of the middle section into the weekend, and it's going to drag a front through us across early next week. Now, what I want to do is I just want to back this up and show you bigger picture things. Because much of this week is drier for North Carolina, in particular in Virginia, we don't see a whole lot of precip. In fact, it's drier than normal. I'll show you how much in a second. South Carolina, Georgia, it's the late week system that's going to be adding to that region. But notice down here, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, this area is drier. The Midwest is drier. Most of this is coming from that system next weekend, which means we're going to have a wide open window to get a lot of planting done in this area this week. In fact, I was driving home from my hometown, Springfield, Illinois, just here across the state, half the way across the state, and I saw 6 planters rolling. I think they were all putting in beans, but I just want to let you know what's going on in the state of Illinois. All right, let's now zoom in and get some idea on the timing of these systems coming through parts of the southeast. So Monday, Tuesday, early Wednesday, high pressure in control. Now here's midday Wednesday, okay? Watch the low start to take shape. Here we are into Thursday afternoon into Friday morning. That's when that first round comes through. So you saw it taking shape on Wednesday, Thursday morning, Thursday midday, Thursday evening, starting to spread into parts of Georgia. Here we are getting into the overnight hours into Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Friday evening, spreading up to the Carolinas. There will be showers and storms with this. And then scattered through the weekend in North Carolina, South Carolina. Now remember, at this point in the weekend, the big system's rolling out in the midsection of the country. It comes through and see its front right there. This is now Sunday getting into Monday. And that's when we think that front should clear us here in the Carolinas down into Georgia. All right, so total precip. Let's just add it all up. Nothing through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the system takes shape. Thursday, it spreads precipitation into Georgia. We then see it spreading into South Carolina, North Carolina, Friday night to Saturday. And the second wave comes through early next week. So we stitch it all together, and this is what I got from the European model. Good chance of picking up an inch of precip across Georgia, South Carolina, a little bit less as you get into North Carolina, but maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a quarter here. That's what we're looking at in a 10-day window. Now, I want to point out one other thing about this pattern just to make this clear. This is a trough sitting right over the North Pole, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spokes out of that. You see it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 troughs. In fact, you could even say 6 and 7. The more of those I count off means the more progressive the pattern is, which means it's going to move. It's going to move to the east. If these were big, long waves and there was only 3 of them instead of 5 or 6 or 7, then the pattern retrogrades. It moves to the west and gets stuck. So what this means is because of the flow of these systems, we tend to see, near normal precipitation across much of the country. But the week 2 forecast is a bit drier in through the midsection of the United States. At the same time, it's a bit more mild in that area. We don't have strong precipitation signals here into week 2 just yet. Now, let's take that narrative and start to build this out a bit farther. This is what the Climate Prediction Center is suggesting day 6 through 10 looks like. Notice they've got us a little wetter than average and mild. Then we go to the day 8 through 14. They're still mild here, but they're trying to bring a colder shot of air at the end of April. Well, really the 3rd week of April and through here. But I think I know why they're giving us this outlook and even stretching it out there into week 3, week 4. Notice how mild they're trying to keep things week 3, week 4. You see, when this forecast was released back on Friday, the thinking at that point was that the MJO was going to go into phase 7. Now, I know I go on and on about the MJO, and it's one of the things I need to sit down and actually just spend a video telling you what it is. But historically, if the MJO is in phase 7, there's a big trough of low pressure here and a big ridge of high pressure there. And what do you end up getting? Drier, wetter. And the flow just dips under it and goes right through it like this. All right, that was Friday. Over the weekend, we saw the MJO come out into phase 7. See it right there? And then it's going to forecast to collapse into phase 8, and we do not know where it's going to come out once it goes into what we call null space, which is right here, which means we don't have a strong ENSO signal. Now, I was trying to explain what this means and its significance to another group, and I'm going to try it on you guys as well. The MJO, which is just watching where there's big thunderstorm events happening in the tropics. And you can see, is it over the Indian Ocean, north of Australia, in the Western Pacific, or resetting back over toward Africa? What we're talking about here is it being in the Western Pacific. The reality is, the MJO is not here necessarily with big storms. It's actually suppressing motion, sinking motion, big areas of high pressure in the Indian Ocean. And the analogy I use, which is just stupid, but it's the only thing I can think of right now. Do you remember back in the 90s when we all had water beds? I don't know. I had a water bed when I was a kid. It is what it is. But do you remember when you had a water bed and you pushed down on one spot and the water came up in the other spot? That's what's going on here. This is kind of a faux or a fake MJO phase 7, in my opinion. And I imagine if you ask 10 different meteorologists, they give you 10 different opinions on it. What I'm saying is I don't have confidence in any long-range forecast right now because of this. And there's another component to it we'll talk about in a second. But if you look out there from April 20th to May 20th, this is what the models are showing in terms of temperatures. Now, it's not a strong signal anywhere but the west and this part of the southern plains. And I look at it and I go, all right, why does it look like that? It will not look like this. We will see a highly variable temperature pattern for the west, the Midwest, the plains, the Carolinas, Georgia. It's going to be a highly variable temperature pattern. I don't see another major risk of we will get cooler air, but no major frost events, or at least on the horizon. If that changes, I will tell you immediately, all right? But that's just what I'm seeing here. That's a frost event coming down all the way down here to the coast is what I'm concerned about. And on the precipitation side of it, this is what it's got for that 30-day outlook. Again, this is the 20th of April to the 20th of May. And I go, well, why wetter here? Near normal up South Carolina, North Carolina, but so dry over the Appalachian Mountains or dry into the Ohio Valley. I don't see a lot of reason to say this is going to be the case. All right. Now, if I just get past this time period, I want to show you what the only big driver left is to talk about, and it's ocean temperatures. Now, we've got a warm central Atlantic. We've got warm off of the coast and very warm in the Gulf. We've got cold water here. That's part of something called the negative PDO, but we do not have La Nina. We've talked about that. We actually have a building El Nino event. And what I want you to see here is that every long-range model is aggressively building El Nino going forward, such that by August we could have ocean temperatures up there 1.5 degrees above normal. That would be as strong as an El Nino event that we had as a La Nina for the last 3 years. And the models are trying to crank this up to maybe up to 2 degrees above normal. And the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia is the most aggressive at almost 2.8 C above normal. Now, we are going to call this into question until it happens, because every meteorologist out there is skeptical on the speed at which you can go from one phase to the other, La Nina to El Nino. But there's something out there going on where every model is in such good agreement about this that's got us all going, all right, well, what would be the implications if that happened? And that's what I want to discuss with you, because this is what we're seeing. By August, the cooler water here fades, the warmer water in this whole area stays in place. Major resurgence of warm water here. And notice the cold versus the warm there. Now, what is all of this? El Nino, the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation, the negative PDO going back toward neutral, and a very strong positive phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. And you say, Eric, these are all teleconnections. Can you just distill this down and tell me what it means? Right now, the model attempting to be internally consistent with itself. In other words, if it produces this ocean temperature forecast, its long-range temperature and precipitation forecasts will be self-consistent. And right now in June, July, August, I'm very perplexed by this. And the reason I'm perplexed by it, this drier bias, is because we're wetter north and south of it, and it's almost suggesting a big area of high pressure sits here. But I don't have historical evidence to say that's the case. Now, is it true that when there's a big El Nino, the East Coast, this part of the East Coast tends to be a little drier? Yes. But is it a slam dunk forecast at this point in the season? No. And what's interesting is I'm going to show you some new data from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. These are models we run in the U.S. That was the European you just saw. Precipitation rate for June, July, August, it's not there in the NMME. So now you know why I have no confidence both in the near term or with the long term, even though we're describing these major drivers. But they are pretty consistent with much of the Midwest, Mid-South, Ohio Valley, Mississippi Valley. All the models are trying to keep that area wetter with a very weak southwest monsoon. But could there be risk of this being drier? We need to know the answer to that question. Could there be risk of it being hotter? Well, right now the models are saying keep the heat here, but watch out for some above average temperatures in the Carolinas. And to be honest, that's why I'm happy that this happened. Moisture getting into the soil now is critical. I know we will use it quickly, but it's important to be watching. So this is what I want to do. I'm going to show you why I'm concerned a bit about the dryer here and how the model's being internally consistent. You see, from May to September, if you correlate something called the multivariate INSO index, you end up getting this graphic. Now what you're looking at here is a correlation with precipitation May to September, and you notice that this is drier. What I think is going on here is that when we have an El Nino, we also have a fluctuation in the position and strength of the Bermuda High. And why it's drier is normally El Nino years suppress hurricane activity. And what we end up getting out of it is this. Now, first things first, the jet stream. Notice the west. There's a ridge here, trough there. Ridge, trough. So the flow goes over and under. And it comes back together and runs around this trough here, which means it likes to do this. Now that little bump right there, that is because we expect the Bermuda Ridge to be broadened and sliding a bit farther to the south. Now if it does that, hurricanes try to come into the Caribbean where they get stuck in the gyre and they don't tend to make it. Or they get suppressed by all of this and never form. Or they come over here into the Gulf. Now it's a lot of drawing in that to say that this could possibly be the reason why we get that historical drier weather. Because when you look at the what's called the geopotential height, June to October, okay, most of the hurricane season, it tends to just be higher farther to the south. And this tends to shut down the hurricane season. And part of that pattern I showed you here is that we need that hurricane season moisture to keep things going in August and September, which is included in this analysis. So this is what I want to tell you. The risk of drought developing this summer is on the table. It's there. And what we have to watch is the position and strength of the Bermuda High. Can I pinpoint its location for you today? I cannot. All I can tell you is that we're going to have to watch it shift around between now and June and July, because its eventual position will determine what this summer is going to look like. If it gets too close to the Carolinas, we're smoked out. It's hot, it's dry, we're going to go back into drought. That's going to give you flooding in the Mid-South, flooding in the Midwest, flooding in the Ohio Valley. If it stays farther to the south or stays out of open ocean, then we're back in business. Plenty of moisture, and we'll avoid extreme heat. All right, that is my thinking right now. I just wanted to share that with you, and I look forward to just watching it evolve and keeping you posted. So we'll talk again next week. Appreciate it. Thank you.